February 2nd is the feast of the presentation of the Lord, which if you pray your rosary, which you should pray your rosary, you'll recognize that as the fourth joyful mystery, the presentation of the Lord. This is when Mary and Joseph bring the infant Jesus 40 days after his birth to the temple in Jerusalem, both to consecrate him as firstborn to the Lord, but also to offer the ritual sacrifices for Mary, who, according to Jewish law, is considered ritually unclean as a mother for 40 days after birth. So what does this have to do with a candle? Why am I holding a candle here, a lit candle? Well, traditionally, this feast is also called Candlemas or Candle Mass. Well, why is that? There's a tradition of blessing candles on this feast day. And in fact, there's an option in the Roman Missal of actually beginning Mass with a solemn procession where everyone enters into the church carrying their lighted candles, and it's very beautiful. But what does all this have to do with the presentation of the Lord? Why candles associated with that day? Well, when Simeon sees the child Jesus being brought into the temple, he proclaims Jesus to be a light of revelation to the Gentiles. And candles represent that light of Christ. You see, for most of human history, until the advent of electricity, where you can just flip a switch and turn on the light in the room, the best way that we had of bringing light into a dark place was to carry a candle, to light a candle and carry it with us. And so this became a symbol of that Christian faith, that light of Christ. And so we bless candles and light candles on this day when we commemorate that proclamation of Simeon that Christ is a light of revelation to the Gentiles, that light shining into the darkness of this world of sin and death, right? So that's one significance of the candle, but there's another. Candles are also used in our prayer and in our liturgy as a form of sacrifice, as a burnt offering to the Lord. And this also ties into the Feast of the Presentation because, Mary comes to the temple to offer a sacrifice for her ritual purification. In Jewish law, mothers were considered ritually impure for 40 days after giving birth, at which point they had to come to the temple and offer a sacrifice. And Mary's sacrifice, we're told, is 2 turtle doves. And that's a poor woman's sacrifice because the normal sacrifice required was 1 lamb and 1 turtle dove. But there was an allowance if you were poor, if you couldn't afford the lamb, that you could sacrifice 2 turtle doves instead, and that's what Mary does. But it's not as if Mary shows up at the temple without a lamb, is it? She does bring a lamb. She brings her son, Jesus, who is the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And so by presenting Jesus in the temple, this is a prefigurement of when he would become our Paschal sacrifice on Calvary. Right? And this is why we as Christians no longer offer sacrifices like lambs and turtle doves and things like that, because Christ has become for us that once and for all sacrifice. Instead, we participate in that sacrifice every time we celebrate the Eucharist. Right? It's that unbloody participation in the sacrifice at Calvary. But that doesn't mean that we as Christians are not called to still offer sacrifices. We do this every time we do penance, every time we fast, every time we endure suffering for the sake of Christ. It's a sacrifice that we're offering to the Lord. It's our participation in his one sacrifice at Calvary. So what does a candle have to do with that, right? Well, this is a burnt offering. If you think about what this candle is, it's a product both of the fruits of the earth, the wax produced by bees, and also the fruits of man, right? Someone had to make this candle. There's an artistry to it. Now, I didn't make the candle. I had to purchase the candle. But by even purchasing the candle, I'm sacrificing something of my material wealth. I'm sacrificing the time that it took me to earn the money that I used to purchase the candle. And as I light that candle and say a prayer, the candle slowly burns down. It's consumed as an offering to God. So this is, in a very real way, a form of making a burnt offering to God. And that's where the tradition comes from of lighting votive candles in the churches. You come into the church, you see that rack of votive candles, you put $1 in the little slot to purchase a candle, you say a prayer, you light the candle, and as long as that candle burns, right, while that wax is being consumed, that's a burnt offering to God. It's a way of extending our prayer beyond just the few moments that it might take us to say the prayer. So a candle is a form of burnt offering. And there's a third significance to the candle, and that has to do with how we're called to spread our faith. Watch this. The light has just spread from this candle to this one, yet this candle hasn't lost anything for sharing its light. This is how we're called to spread the gospel, to spread the good news. Right? When we share our faith with others, our faith isn't diminished. Right? Instead, the faith grows as it's passed from one person to another. This is brought out most clearly not during the presentation of the Lord, but during the Easter Vigil, when the Exultet is proclaimed. The Easter Vigil also begins with a solemn procession of lighted candles into the church, and we light the large Easter candle, the Paschal candle. And as that candle is brought into the church, the smaller candles held by all the faithful are lit from that one large candle until the church is full of light. And then the deacon gets up and he proclaims that Exultet chant in which he praises the flame that is divided into many smaller flames, but yet not diminished by the sharing of its light. In fact, the light grows. And this is how you and I are called to share our faith, right? To spread that light, to increase the light of Christ by sharing it with others, just as one candle takes its light from the other. Praise be Jesus Christ.